Today we have a sponsorship from Red Fox. No, not that one. They're a part-time writer with a focus on creative stories.
Their main story is called Fox Cafe. It focuses around a young fox girl by the name of Holly, her best friend Nicole, and their various interactions with the customers who come in on a daily basis.
It starts off with a slow slice-of-life tone, but gradually builds, revealing that not everything is as it seems. Each of the chapters represents a different day, and sometimes they occur on the same day depending on the number. As the chapters go on, new amazing creatures with spectacular powers are revealed, and it seems the peaceful world that surrounds the Fox Cafe could be on the brink of war. And I'm not too surprised, my experience with foxes shows that they are the harbingers of chaos.
You talking about me?
I might be.
It's times like this I wish I had magic powers to kick your ass.
Well, you won't unless I write that you have them.
You can find the stories on the Amino app across various communities, with their primary focus being in the furry community. We highly recommend checking out their work.
Follow the links below to check them out. And if you want to showcase your own work, head over to our website to fill out a request. Alright, my darlings. Well, we're not quite done revisiting some of my old classics just yet, and so we're going to be taking a look at a video that, while it was popular before, I feel it could have been done better.
Let me guess. Is it Danger Mouse?
Nope.
Is it the Rick and Morty video?
Nah.
Oh, is it the Angry Kid video and you're finally going to admit that you like it this time?
Never. No, we're going to be looking at what is still my favourite TV series of all time, Dick and Dom, Inda Bungalow.
Wake up, Dick and Dom, and get out of bed. Get yourselves dressed, there's a crazy day ahead.
Yes, we're looking at arguably the most famous and popular CBBC show ever made. And with this being the 20-year anniversary of the show's beginning, what better time to look back at it again? So let's get into it. For those who aren't aware of this double act, who sound like the press name of a dominatrix and her sub, Dick and Dom are Richard McCourt and Dominic Wood, a comedic children's double act who first got their start in children's shows in the 90s, with Dick being a continuity presenter on CBBC and Dom being a regular on shows like The Animal Magic Show and The Really Wild Show. Eventually the two paired up as a duo in a dynamic that felt almost like a child-friendly version of Rick Mayall and Adrian Edmondson.
This is what the viewers have been waiting for all week.
I bet it's not. I bet it's not.
They only tuned in this...
Why don't you email in if you like me doing this, or you'd rather see him do it?
Sounds like you're cruising for one of my looks, young man.
Sounds like you're a complete wanker, but what's new?
And went on to be on more shows together, such as Bring It On, a show where they would have to tackle doing something they'd never done before, like being cowboys, or being part of the Bognor Birdman. A feat which is a lot harder than it seems with all the trash and evidence the local mafia throws into that sea. In 2002, they teamed up with producer Steve Fry to get their own show that was centered around them, in the vein of classic weekend kids variety shows like Tiz Was, Crackerjack and Whack-A-Day. Yes, that was an actual show for kids. And we're barely a page into the script and we've already gotten more sex references than we should have. But this show was done with a few more twists. For one, unlike those shows mentioned above, which were more or less just sketches to sandwich together the cartoons, the focus was more on the hosts and the kids involved, with the cartoons just being a side thing to add in some gaps. 2, the show was a game show, with games and events running through the show that the contestants, or bungalow heads as they were called, would earn points in, or even have the chances to lose them or bargain them for other things. And of course, there would be prizes to win at the end. But the most significant element about this show is that it was all done live. You'll have to imagine me doing air quotes there, since this isn't a preset of me in these cartoons of me doing it. And Huck doesn't even have fingers, so he can't do it either.
But I can still hold a cricket bat, and maybe I should go and get mine now.
No, that won't be necessary. Let's move on. We'll get into the live thing later, but that's one of the big draws of this show back when it was on. And so, on the 31st of August 2002, the world was introduced to Dick and Dom Inda Bungalow.
Hello there. What is up, and welcome to Da Bungalow. My name is Dickety Dick.
And my name's Dobbity Dom.
The show's formula was that Dick and Dom live in a crazy fun house of a bungalow and have kids come over to stay the weekend there.
Best we refrain from doing any dirty jokes about that, I think.
Indeed. Who then play games to earn points which will get them prizes. Or as the show put it... And yes, I said the weekend, since this show's game, quite uniquely, was spread over 2 days, one episode on a Saturday morning and another the next day on the Sunday, with the same kids and their points carry over. Certainly was a long game. The first 2 series were only broadcast on the CBBC channel, which back then you could only get through Freeview or satellite TV, which most households didn't have. My guess as to why they did this was to either entice people to get Freeview to increase the ratings for the channel, or more likely, the BBC were a bit afraid that this show would bomb, so they put it on their exclusive channel, so if it did, most audiences wouldn't have seen it. And people wonder why the BBC is struggling when they make so many great decisions like that. However, despite that, the show was incredibly popular, and so the Saturday episodes from Series 3 onwards were broadcast on BBC One, which every household could watch, and thus brought the show to the masses, and all of its craziness and mad games in tow. And the games in question, well, when they're being dreamed up by 2 comedians who act like big kids and a production crew who took the show about as seriously as the actual children on it, you're gonna get some mad stuff. Like, how about a game where you cover yourself in chocolate spread, or Dirty Norris as they called it, which sounds like the name of a cheap escort you'd find in Peckham, and then stick hair to yourself? No? Not weird enough? How about a game where you try to guess how many times a random member of the public will slap themselves in the face with a fish? Still not weird enough? How about a game of Russian roulette but with chocolates, one of which is full of fish paste? Or wearing an irrigation system under your arms and pumping it out of yourself? Or catching unidentifiable muck from halfway across the room and then eating it?
Can we just show the camera what
What you
bowl
had.
consists of?
That's what he was eating.
Look at
You were
that.
masticating that.
And no, I'm not making any of these up. These were really all played multiple times. Admittedly, some of the games in hindsight are a bit too intense and arguably cruel, which is one of the contributing factors to how this show could have been never done today, but they are fun as hell to watch, and a little roughhousing never hurt anyone. I mean, I had a rough childhood and I turned out fine.
Says the guy who makes videos talking about old kids' shows whilst talking to a cartoon fox.
Hey, compared to other YouTubers like these guys, I'm stable by comparison. Plus, the kids would always get the chance to get their own back, as Dick and Dom were never out of the messy action, despite their objections.
Jeannie, I wish you would pour Dirty Norris on Tom, Dick and Harry.
And this is where the main core of what made this show so funny and why it's still so much fun to watch now as an adult is. Dick and Dom's style of presenting and comedic chemistry comes from how they act very professional and charming 1 minute, and then they totally flip and act very cynical and disenchanted the next.
Right, let's have a look at what's been happening today on Dick and Dom in the Bungalow.
Can you remember? Do you want to be reminded?
Last week.
Oh, it's last week. Mate, it's a days like this. I love you and I love my job.
And when you mix that with a bunch of crazy kids, total nonsense games, and a show that was made on the cheap and given the setup has a bunch of things that can and do go wrong all the time, then you've got the perfect recipe for comedic gold. And I mean it, pretty much everything went wrong with this show in some fashion. Not just the games, but the sound,
And also a Sarah.
the camera work,
No, don't smear it in even more.
the equipment,
Gabriel has got nothing because the scoreboard has bust! You stupid Tiso!
the scripts,
Go along the roundabout and take the 3rd exit on
This is the script. It's the script and it's rubbish. Who's written this?
the costumes,
Wait, keep the toilet roll.
the effects,
There we go. Oh, it's rubbish.
even the broadcast would sometimes go tits up, either by design or, in most cases, these things would just happen at complete random.
Cut trousers.
But one of the brilliant things about this show is that they just embraced it. They didn't care if things went wrong. They either just rolled with it or adapted to it. And this is what made the show so funny. It's kind of like those shows you see posters for called The Show That Goes Wrong, but done more organically. And it's such a rarity to see in professional television that it does take you by surprise. And the kids will like it because of the silliness, but the adults will also like it because of seeing something go wrong on a TV series and seeing the hilariously frustrated reaction from the hosts. And sometimes even the crew, as you can hear laughing from the gallery behind the camera all the time.
We have no walls in the bungalow. We better get out quick, the roof's coming in.
You can't just run around and kick them. That would be rubbish.
Good thing that doesn't happen here.
Well, that's because you're so unfunny that there's nothing for them to laugh at.
Sometimes I really hate being stuck in this one spot, because it means I can't throttle you for comments like that. Of course, sometimes this formula would result in mistakes that should never happen in a kids show, like this.
For goodness sake! Right, no!
But that just made the show all the funnier for both kids and adults again. And yeah, it drew the attention of some people who complained about it, not the least of which being from old Terry Wogan, who the boys would always get back at whenever they could.
How long before this item's taken off air? Call in on this number. Here's the number. It is 00.
Just give out Terry Wogan's email address.
But the controversy just added fuel to the fire and drew more attention to the show, and would even be used as future material in sketches and games, kind of like South Park. And thankfully one of their regular cast wasn't a member of Scientology. Not that I'd imagine they would mock something like that on a kids show, but given how even MPs and Anglican religious groups got offended by this show, I'm sure Scientology would have found something to sue them over. Of course, just because the thing that makes a show great is in how it goes wrong all the time, that doesn't mean that this show was easy to make, or that no effort was put into it, because there was definitely a lot of craft and passion put into it. The set, for example, is great, and while it is cheap looking, it has a very childlike imagination to its design and almost a Picasso-like structure and colour scheme, and it really makes you feel like a kid when you're looking at it, and I'm sure it felt amazing to be in. Granted, that illusion was probably shattered when you look out from it and you see this. But still, what we, the audience, see does look great. The bungalow started off with basically one big room for the first two series, but as the show got more popular, the set grew and they got more rooms to work in. Series 3 introduced the spare rooms and the basement, Series 4 introduced the attic, and Series 5 refurbished the basement set into the garden set.
Probably because they realized, wait, this place has a basement and an attic? Then it's not technically a bungalow anymore. We better fix that.
Yeah. Then they'd have to pay more tax on it. The kids were always a lot of fun to watch, especially since the kind of groups they got in would always be so different. Some would be laid back, some would be witty and smart, and others, well, most to be frank, would be totally crazy and out of control. The kids were sort of the main ingredient to the show, while Dick and Dom were the ones providing the colour commentary to the whole situation. What the kids were doing was what brought the energy and life to the show that made everything go, and the games energised that even more. Of course, sometimes the kids would take things a bit too far and get a bit too caught up in just how lawless the show seemed, but that just made it funnier, especially to see the exasperated reactions from the hosts.
I don't want to go back.
We've got to go back to them.
I don't want to go back.
It's going to be a nutty weekend.
A few of the bungalow heads have gone on to become just as iconic as the hosts themselves. Jack for his invention of the famous butt dance, Lewis for getting the highest score in the show's history, and Raja for being, well, just being him, really.
So this
A man after my own heart.
Regrettably, yes. Dick and Dom even reunited with this guy quite recently, which certainly took them by surprise.
I know who you are. Like I said, my recall's happening. I know your eyes. He's in there. What do you do as a job?
I work in the civil service.
I love the idea of him still being that badly behaved in the civil service.
Well, to be fair, civil service employees have a history of just not giving a shit about what they do in their job, so he probably could get away with it. For the record, my favourite bungalow head is George, and not for the obvious reasons. He was just so sarcastic and just didn't care. He was like a mix between Ronnie Corbett and Bill Murray. It was great.
Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.
But of course, it wasn't just the kids who gave the show its sparkle. Dick and Dom couldn't keep the show going on their own, so there were always people helping them out and playing characters or joining in with the sketches and such, all of whom are insanely talented and really deserve credit. Not just for their skill, but also being able to keep face when all the stuff like this happened to them.
Can I have some soup, please, dear?
There you are.
I'll give you a tip. Don't go into show business.
though that's probably still preferable than having to act alongside Jared Leto. The most popular of the bunch was classically trained ex-Shakespearean actor, physical comedian, and voice actor Ian Kirkby, who played many characters on the show, including the two most popular reoccurring ones, Raymond Farmer and Harry Batt. Raymond Farmer originally started off as a character introduced in the later episodes of Series 3 called Raymond Duck, who was basically a spoof of news reporters who had recapped the events of the cartoon shown in the middle of the show. The character was reinvented in Series 4 as Raymond Farmer, presumably the guy who owned Raymond Duck, and took over because he probably ate duck between series.
Must have taken him a while if he was that big. The amount of orange sauce he'd need would be enough to bathe in.
Huh. I always wondered what David Dickerson used to keep his look up. He provided the same role as his predecessor, but after a few weeks, either the producers felt that the kids just didn't care about the cartoon parts of the show, or decided to have a bit of fun with the character, and gave him more crazy, elaborate, and incorrect recaps of the cartoons.
Having been consumed by a giant frig roll, our three little friends... a fig roll.
Right.
Yes, our three little friends need to find some welding equipment rather quickly.
Which, to be fair, with some of the cartoons they used to show on this show, it's hard to tell if they were joking or not. And have Raymond be shown being doing more increasingly silly things.
Now I got a brand new spacey space opera, would you like a bounce? When I'm not bouncing, I sell horsemen you 50p an ounce.
In Series 5, they replaced the role with Raymond Newsreader, who would only give accurate recaps on the shows and was a bit more down to earth, relatively speaking.
Still, he's more respectable than some of the BBC's other former newsreaders.
Whoa there, Huck, keep it clean. Harry Batt was easily the most popular of his characters, as well as the most popular character on the show as a whole, which is funny since he originally was meant to just be a one-off, but grew into a character who appeared in every episode.
Like me?
Well, you kinda snuck your way in, and now I just can't get rid of you.
Because you know now that if you do, no one will watch you anymore.
It should be noted that there was sort of a prototype of his role in Series 3, DC Inspector Muttonchops, played by Dick in the Spot Maddest Town, which we'll get into later, who was basically a spoof of Jack Regan from The Sweeney, and was a lot more abrasive and angry than Bad, but the seed of the character was there. The true character made his debut in the first episode of Series 4, which was probably done because Dick couldn't play himself and DC Muttonchops at the same time, so they had to invent a placeholder character. Where they did their final sketch involving the bungalow being raided by the police, and Bat was the officer in charge. It was a good little sketch, but it was intended to be a one and done one, but something happened a few episodes later that made the makers feel he would be needed. The bungalow often had phone-in sections, bits where the viewers could interact and play along with the show, which was quite common in CBBC shows of this era. This included mind-controlling Dick, awarding or taking away points from the bungalow heads, directing snot at the lads, but the most significant one were the phone-in games, where two or more viewers would have to make guesses on certain things that would happen, like how long one of the cast could stay on a mechanical bull, or which old man could cough their wig off first, or how long a member of the public could keep a ferret down their trousers.
What?
Oh yeah, they really did that. Another reason this show could never be done today. That and this technically counts as underage gambling, but let's not dwell on that. One of these games was That's the Stuff, where a random member of the public would have to eat as many spoonfuls of a certain type of foodstuff or condiment as they could. The last two times they did it, Dick and Dom themselves stepped up to the mark to do it. Dom went first to eat garlic mayo, but he didn't really want to do it. Can't say I blame him, garlic mayo feels like napalm on the way out.
Ew!
So he switched it for a jar of yogurt and made it seem like it was the real thing. But the crew knew that he did it and decided to have some fun with that. After the game was over, Bat made a surprise appearance, confronting Dom over his crime and tried to get him to face justice.
We've got reason to believe that you weren't eating garlic mayonnaise.
You absolute swine!
And in Series 5, he was promoted to a major reoccurring character, getting 2 of his own games, and even getting to finally give Dom his karmic retribution in the final episode.
Are you going to be a big boy and eat your dinner up for all the lovely nice boys and girls at home? You're not?
I know now how I want to end this show. Just replace the bowl of gruel with cyanide for you.
You can try, but I grew up in a seaside town next to a sewer works. I can swallow anything and it'll be fine.
Unless it's negative comments.
Shut up! Bat was even so popular that he even got his own spin-off pilot made, which sadly never made it to series, cameos in other Steve Wright productions, and even guest appearances in other shows, and he's become by far the most recognised character in the series, making Kirkby the most faithful of the Bungalow family. But he's not the only member of this household. The other most famous member of the team was Dave Chapman, voice actor and puppeteer who was previously known as the voice and operator of the beloved Arnold the Aardvark on CBBC, and would provide all the puppets used in the series and did the voice of most of them, such as the Cat, who arguably has provided the most famous clip of the series.
Stoke-on-Trent, oh yeah, to Stoke-on-Trent, historic town on the River Trent.
Maybe you should sing a song about Grimsby in your puppet form and we'll finally get a video whose views goes into the millions.
Doubt it.
And he would also dress up as characters and play them as well. He was a lot of fun, and his vocal range is really impressive, especially with his impressions of people like Kenneth Williams, Jonathan Ross, Ian McDermott and others. And, not surprisingly, after Dick and Dom, his career boosted, since puppetry is a very niche craft, so you'll find more jobs in it for sure. And he certainly did, making appearances in Star Wars and the Dark Crystal show after that, making him probably the most successful of the Dick and Dom gang.
My eyes are made of plastic. Ow! That's violence in the workplace, man.
Does that mean soon you're gonna—
Not yet! Then there's Melvin O'Doom, an actor and dancer who would also play other characters, as well as show off his seriously good moves. I wish I could do moves like that, if I had legs. He was one of the ones who got pushed the most in being the next star in the Bungalow. In fact, in Series 5, they even started referring to him by his name, which they rarely did for the other members, and he even got his own games. Granted, his career didn't quite flourish after the series was over, but after a slow burn, he did manage to get himself noticed, being contestant on Strictly Come Dancing, being teamed up with Ricky Hayward-Williams as a radio and occasional TV presenters, and making a ton of other TV appearances, and even a few film ones, whilst looking jacked as hell. Pretty good for a man in his 40s.
Well, you know what they say, black don't crack.
What do they say about orange?
Well, nothing, because it doesn't rhyme.
And finally, there was Lee Barnett, who really only played one role, but is the second most famous character to come out of the Bungalow, the Prize Idiot.
AKA another one of your long-lost siblings.
Quiet, you! Who showcased the prizes for the phone-in games, along with a nice visual pun to go with them, some of which were quite clever.
I thought I'd actually, for once, catch up with the times and get myself one of those 3P players.
3P players.
Most of which weren't.
I'm having a heart attack!
No, hang on a minute. No, stop that. That's not funny. That's really horrible.
A cheese. I'm your role model. Shut up.
Right, pelt him with rolls.
The worst one yet, that. I've never heard anything so stupid in my life.
But given the way Dick and Dom used to treat him, you can't blame him for not putting in the effort to make good puns. I think we now know why old Lee disappeared after this show was over. Still, these guys made the show as much fun to watch as the main boys themselves did, and really do deserve a medal for all the crap they were put through on this show. Something I didn't mention the last time was the music. The music in this series is great, from the theme song to the bumpers they played before the games, or even the incidental music they played in the background. It really was catchy, bouncy and fun.
At the end of a good clean contest, may the ugliest kid have won. It's the WBC Ugly Mug-Off, second half, round one.
And it really played a big part in giving this show its identity. All made courtesy of Andy Blythe and Martin Jostra, who have done tons of music for film, TV and even video games, and really deserve credit since imagine how tricky it is to add music to something like this. Also, I mentioned before that the show was promoted as being broadcast live, but I'm not so sure about that. There's clearly times in the show where cuts happen that would require a huge amount of time to pass between them. I mean, let's face it, to make this much of a mess and have it cleaned up in 15 minutes, that's not really possible. But even then, they would have phone-in games where the viewers could take part, so there clearly was some sort of live element to this show. Someone told me that the Saturday episodes were done live, but the Sunday ones were not. But even then, that doesn't make sense, since some of the Saturday shows had obvious post-production edits in them, and the Sunday shows still had call-in games, so what was really going on here? I'll probably never find out the true reason, but this has always been one of the biggest enigmas of the show, and given how weird and random this show can be, That's saying a lot. Speaking of which, I mentioned that this show had a bit of controversy surrounding it. It wasn't always because of the naughty kids. The writers and the producers of the show clearly had a sardonic and adult sense of humour and tried to push it as much as they could in this show. And most of the time it was welcomed, since it's always great to see adult jokes sneak in their way to kids media, but there were a few times it went a little too far. The most famous of times being in one of the last episodes of Series 3, Dom wore a shirt saying Morningwood. It was meant to be a pun based on his job as a Saturday morning host and also his last name, but evidently many people didn't quite think it was that funny.
Also ironic that the guy who's named Dick wasn't wearing a shirt making a joke about a penis.
Also, and how I'm surprised it took you that long to make a comment on a name like that. Bravo on showing some restraint for a change. And the other most well-known instance probably being the way they ended Series 4, with an ongoing sketch through the whole episode about Dick being pregnant and then giving birth at the end of the episode. Truth be told, after having watched this episode multiple times, I'm still not sure how to feel about it. But like anything from Dick and Dom, you just kinda accept it and enjoy the ride. Nowadays especially, since we'll never be able to see a show like this ever again. Though there is one aspect of this show that will live on forever. Oh yes, time to get to that part. As well as the cartoons, the show is broken up by pre-recorded segments of the boys going out into the streets to play games with the public. There were the games where they tried to get the public to do certain things such as Scary Town, Public Transport, and the aforementioned Maddest Town, which also gave the boys the chance to try out their other characters to play themselves, like Mutton Chops, Little Bob Peep, and Martin Floppyhorns. There was also the character of Tom, Dick, and Harry used on the Sunday episodes for the forfeit auction section, where the Bungalow heads would buy pranks to play on each other with their own points, and he definitely deserves a mention for being the origin of my sign-on and off phrases.
Up with this, I'm going on the other side to have a bath.
But of all the outside bungalow moments, the big games they played at the expense of the public were by far the most popular aspect of the show. It started off with bogeys, where the boys would enter into a public space and shout the word bogeys as loud as they could, each time getting louder and louder. Whoever couldn't top the last one, or who gave up first, was the loser.
Bogies. Bogies! Bogies! Bogies!
He's got something.
Bogies!
This may sound stupid, but like most of what happened on the show, the immature part was just one element to it. But there was also the acknowledgement of what the hell are we doing that just made it funnier and smarter. And Bogies was a great example of that, not just in the reaction from the boys of having to play this silly game, but also the brilliant commentary provided by Steve Ride himself.
Bogies!
All his bravery and meat. Only deliver a 9.0. McCord's tactics paid off, he still wins.
And this game has lived on, since I've seen people still playing it even—
Bogies.
Wait, what are you—
Bogies.
Stop doing that.
Bogies.
What are you doing?
I'm playing the game, but it doesn't work if you don't do it back.
I'm not doing it back.
Why, afraid you'll lose?
No, because the last time I played I nearly blew my vocal cords out. I'm not risking that again. But of course, there were some other games played like this. The second most popular one was where the boys had to stick stickers of increasing size onto people's backs, but without them noticing, which is also a contender for the stupidest game name in the world. Try saying that one, you bastard.
Oh god.
That one was even better, but my favourite was Dirty Day, because it was just hilarious.
Flick it! Flick it! Face!
No, I don't like you, no go.
Charmingly.
All this madness gave us a show that remained mostly the same for 3 years, up until the last series. Either the BBC were worried that the show was getting tired, or the producers, knowing it was the last series, decided to inject some new life into the show and made a few changes in Series 5. For one thing, the Sunday episodes were changed from 2 hours to 1 hour, which is debatable if that was a good idea or not, since naturally they couldn't do as much as they normally could. But on the other hand, it made the show so much tighter and rushed that it was absolute chaos a lot of the time and was hilarious. But the most significant change was that on the Saturday episodes, every 6th Bungalow head would be a celebrity. This was a significant change since all the previous series made a big deal about how celebrities were not allowed into the bungalow, so to repeal that rule felt very strange. Now granted, they experimented with this idea before with a bunch of comic relief special episodes near the end of Series 4, where all the Bungalow heads were celebrities. or the closest things to celebrities that they could get at the time. And many of them did return for Series 5, though sadly not Ed Byrne. Not only was he great on that show, but he's one of my favourite comedians.
Hello, my name's Ed Byrne. I'm a stand-up comedian. I'm from Ireland. I'm on tour at the moment, but you're all too young to come to the show. I eat my own bogies and sometimes other people's.
But the ones that they did get to come back were good choices. Gina Yashere, Fern Cotton, Brian Connolly, and the new ones they got were pretty good too. Danny Harmer, Ryan Maloney, Adam Woodyat, even Andy McNabb. It's amazing how far some celebrities will go to expand their fan base.
All except one, right?
Oh, yeah, let's talk about her. Despite how desperate and sellout this idea seemed, it did bring a new layer to the show and some new opportunities that we'd never seen before. And most of the time it did work, but the first time they tried it nearly blew the whole thing. The first celebrity they got was former S Club 7 member Rachel Stevens, probably the biggest celeb they ever got for the show, and it was a good one to start out with on paper. But it seems she wasn't quite game, as she refused to take part in a lot of the messier bits of the show and ran off set. Twice.
Second time today, that. She's wimped out. She don't want to get covered in muck.
Back to the game.
That's what it's all about, love! First of a new series of Dick and Dom in a Bungalow, the show where Rachel Stevens legged it. Because she didn't want any of that on her face. Ooh.
And for the rest of the series, the boys then mocked how much of a prima donna she seemed to be, to the point where they even mentioned it in the final episode's big finale. Now granted, having learnt a bit more about the fraught backstory of what it was like in S Club 7 at the time, since having to go through all that and then being made to go on a show where you have to do things that she clearly didn't want to do, I can sympathise a little bit. But if you go on a show like this, you have to know what's going to happen and get involved. And even for the non-messy stuff, she didn't really seem to care. Either take part or don't go on the show.
You willing to put your money where your mouth is there? You gonna get messy too?
Well, I'm just talking about the show. I don't need to do that. Besides, that normally didn't happen until the very end.
I see.
Still, despite that slip-up, most of the celebs were game and seemed to have a great time, and it was a good way to make the final series seem more grand, and their reappearance in the final episode really make it feel like a big farewell show, and the final moment was a lot of fun. So, apparently there was a giant wearing old Reebok shoes living next to the boys all this time. Who knew? And that was the end of the Bungalow, but it wasn't the end of Dick and Dom. After taking a much-deserved 3-year break, they returned in 2009 with a big comeback, with the comedy fantasy series The Legend of Dick and Dom, which I've talked about before, Dick and Dom Go Wild, a wildlife show and a nice callback to their early days, and Splat-A-Lot, aka kid-friendly Total Wipeout. And it wasn't the end for Steve Ride and his crew either. Only a year later, they made the sitcom/talent reality show The Slammer, which starred many of the other cast members of the Bungalow and also provided most of Dick and Dom's other shows like The Legend, and provided a few spin-offs for the other characters the two would play on the show, Diddy Dick and Dom, who I forgot to mention last time because I was planning on doing a separate video just for them, but I forgot. Sorry.
You forgot, or you were just too lazy to do it?
Shh! But of course, The Bungalow was a huge cult phenomenon in the 2000s, and as its viewer base grew up, they still remembered it, and weirdly the fact that it was not available on home video due to the length and copyright from certain music and sound effects used in the show, and the fact that the BBC were probably a little embarrassed by it, only helped fuel the intrigue and demand for it. And thanks to many people archiving it and preserving the show online, thanks in no small part to me, if I may toot my own horn a little bit, the show has gained a new appreciation and more people are watching it now than ever, which led to the live show revival this year, which I went to see and was amazing. It was done with a slightly more adult edge than the original series, but it kept mostly kid-friendly, and the constant one-upmanship and backbiting between the two was as fresh as always, and brilliant to see in person.
Don't be back. Well, take it. It's your job.
And so, with the show's legacy firmly secured in TV history online, thanks as well to the Dick and Dom archive which I made that you can see here, this brilliant, crazy, and kinda inappropriate but fun as hell show will live on. And while there has been some demand for a new series, I think it's best to leave it as it is. The live show was great, but I think it works best as a one-off thing. The only reason I'd want to see a new series would be so that I can go on it, since I was kinda bummed when my application to be a part of the live show didn't get accepted, so I didn't get to take part.
Well, I can fix that for you.
What? Oh, well, looks like it's time for me to pull a Rachel Stevens, and if I do, maybe I won't need to go on to the other side to have a bath. Bye!
Zero, zero, zero.